Tonight, President Ronald Reagan is Congress with his annual State of the Union address. Steve Kaufman looks back on the history of this message, which is called for by the Constitution of the United States.
The United States Constitution begins with three important words: we, the people. It is by this authority that our country is ruled. The Constitution, housed in the rotunda of the National Archives in Washington, contains a section which specifies that Congress, and thus the people, shall be informed about important information pertaining to the nation. Specifically, Article 2, Section 3 states that the President shall from time to time give to Congress information of the State of the Union.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate and of the House of Representatives, the Constitution wisely provides that the Chief Executive shall report to the Congress on the State of the Union.
It started out at the very beginning as an annual address. George Washington established that precedent, and it was, in those days, it was simply called the annual message. It wasn't called the State of the Union address until 1945.
According to historian Raymond Smock, once Thomas Jefferson became the third president, a 113-year period began where presidents sent only written messages to Congress on the State of the Union.
Exactly. I think there were several reasons why Jefferson didn't want to come up before the Congress. One is he did think that this appeared too much as if it was the king going before Parliament.
Moving into the 1800s, President Abraham Lincoln was faced with the end of the Civil War and a separated Union, a difficult yet opportune time to give an important message to the Congress on the abolition of slavery.
One of his most memorable speeches in 1862, where he talked about freeing the slaves and the importance of freeing the slaves meant that if you freed the slaves, then the free would also be free. It was one of the most memorable State of the Union addresses ever.
During the early 1900s, with World War I raging in Europe, President Woodrow Wilson resumed addressing Congress in person, a practice continued thereafter. It was the stock market crash in 1929 and the Great Depression that followed which helped Franklin D. Roosevelt win the presidency over Herbert Hoover. His New Deal policies captured the American public, who are now able to hear the address on radio.
Brings me to the problem of what the government should do with approximately 5 million unemployed now on the relief rolls. It is not empty optimism that moves me to a strong hope in the coming year.
The 1950s brought a new set of problems needing attention. President Harry S. Truman sent U.S. troops to Korea in an effort to contain the spread of communism in Asia.
As we meet here today, American soldiers are fighting a bitter campaign in Korea. We pay tribute to their courage, devotion, and gallantry.
Truman's successor, Dwight D. Eisenhower, found his 2 terms as president focused on a new type of hostility, the Cold War with the Soviet Union.
The policy we pursue will recognize the truth that no single country, even one so powerful as ours, can alone defend the liberty of all nations threatened by communist aggression from without or subversion within.
During the early 1960s, when the Cuban Missile Crisis had the entire world concerned about a global war, a young president responded to the Soviet threat, John F. Kennedy.
A year ago, in assuming the task of the presidency, I said that few generations in all history had been granted the role of being the great defender of freedom in its hour of maximum danger. This is our good fortune, and I welcome it now, as I did a year ago.
I think President John F. Kennedy was one of our most effective public speakers among the presidents. Certainly his State of the Union addresses captured the rhetoric and had a ring to them that was very effective.
For it is the fate of this generation, of you in the Congress, and of me as president, to live with a struggle we did not start, in a world we did not make. But the pressures of life are not always distributed by choice, and while no nation has ever faced such a challenge, no nation has ever been so ready to seize the burden and the glory of freedom. And in this high endeavor, may God watch over the United States of America.
Tonight,
President Reagan comes to Capitol Hill to address the 100th Congress and the nation in his 6th State of the Union address. Last year, the president had to delay his remarks for 2 weeks because of the space shuttle tragedy. Tonight, presidential advisors say it's likely the president's remarks will be about terrorism and the Iran-Contra affair, issues on the mind of the American public. Steve Kaufman, WorldNet.